Hey beekeepers, thought I'd give you a quick update on what's going to happen with the Parkinson hive this year, 2022. If you remember last fall, the prototype here on the property went queenless, and that's actually a blessing because they didn't make it through winter, and now I can make some changes to that prototype hive. It's really just a couple of the changes to the stand and stuff that have been made over the years that I didn't roll into this hive. So I'll bring it up to spec, and then that'll also give me a chance to get a little bit of better pictures on some things and get the build manual updated. Also rearrange the build manual a little bit so it's a little more intuitive. And then finally, I'm going to run an experiment. And before I get to that, so if you go back 6.5 years when I was first thinking of this hive, it's like, okay, what do I want to do? I want to create a perfect environment for the bees, and regardless of beekeepers, make a perfect environment for the bees so that they would have the best chance of surviving. And at the time, I was reading the frame holders would need to be 1 3/8 inches wide. Yes, that's exactly 1 3/8 inches, because that was the standard. That's what's best. So I said, okay, all of our frame holders are 1 3/8 inches wide, and that meant that you had to, take a table saw and rip 2x4s and 1x4s to 1 3/8 inches wide, and that's fine. What that allowed us to do is build the prototype and the follow-on hives and use that same mechanism. And over the course of 5 and 6 years, that proved to be very successful. Great. So we proved that slope design and the stair step of the frame holders, that works. But it's also a pain to build because you have to have a table saw and you're ripping a whole bunch of lumber and making a whole bunch of sawdust. And so one of the things I'm going to experiment with is this standard size US lumber. This is 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. So one of the things that I want to do is make a bunch of frame holders out of what in the US they call a 2x2 and 1x2. So this is a 2x2, and a 1x2 is just 3/4 inches by 1.5. So they're both just 1/8 inch wider than I need. And the question is, what happens when your frame holder is 1/8 inch wider? Well, thanks to the top bar guys, I kind of have an answer to that. The Kenyan top bar guys. So they'll have, some of them will use 1 3/8 inch wide bars over the brood chamber. Again, that's exactly 1 3/8 inch. And then when you get to the honey area, they move it out to it's 1.5 inches wide. And again, that's exactly 1.5 inches wide. So they have narrower bars over the brood chamber and wider bars over the honey area. So I have an idea that using 1.5 inch material in the honey section of the hive is going to work just fine. But I'm not sure about the brood area. Now, the interesting thing is I read a bunch about historical hives. Back in the late 1850s, a lot of people were building hives, and they were trying to come up with the exact right brood box size, and then you throw a honey super on. They were trying to make these automatic beehives, is what they called them. And the idea was you have a single brood box that's the perfect size for brood, and then you slap honey supers on top of it. And that was the idea behind Langstroth and everybody else. And people are arguing that Langstroth's brood boxes are too small, right? And to some extent, that's actually true. And Dedant, for instance, said you need a bigger box. Well, the problem with the bigger box is that the bees are in a cluster, and in the coldest winter, they didn't move side to side to get that honey on the sides. So even though there was a bigger brood box, they couldn't make use of it. And that's the same problem that long Langstroths have too. And so then people are saying, oh, you need smaller boxes. And anyway, in addition to the box size, people were experimenting with the bar size and the frame size. And some people had 1.5 inch frames. Some people had 1 3/4 inch frames. Some people had 1 1/4 inch frames. Eventually, everybody just threw up their hands and said, let's go with 1 3/8. But people have used 1.5 inch frames. But what nobody has done is used a Langstroth 1 3/8 inch wide, Langstroth frame in a 1.5 inch space. So I'm curious if I'm going to get a bunch of burr comb or cross comb or what the deal will be in the brood area. So we'll see what happens. But by the time I get the changes made to the stand, and by the time I make these, with everything else going on here, I'm going to be building a shop, so I'm not working outside in northern Wisconsin. So that's going on as well. But by the time I get that done, it'll be late July, and that's way too late to get bees. So I won't know the answer to this until next summer. But it is coming, as are the updates to the build manuals. Also, the videos are still coming. So there's a lot going on. Even though you won't see a lot of bees, you'll see a lot of activity this year. So stay tuned. And if anybody, by the way, wants to take a shot at building, out of 2x2s and 1x2s and build some frame holders that way, have at it. Post your results. We'd love to hear it. All right. Until later, thanks everybody. Happy beekeeping.